What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I am on the SP404-SX, so I've actually gone back a generation, and what I'd like to show you in today's video is how I've managed to get Ableton to control the samples and trigger the samples in the SX via MIDI. So this is a really exciting workflow to me. I've been using Ableton a lot in my beat making workflows, and the fact that I can just sample into the SX but then use Ableton is kind of the brain for the programming and sequencing of those samples and just get all that running with just a MIDI cable going into the back of the SX. That's really, really exciting to me. So I hope that this can get you up and running doing the same thing. Now I just want to start with a quick caveat. It's really, really difficult to help you guys with your questions related to hardware related issues. I don't know what cables you're using. I don't know what interfaces you're using. I don't know your setup. So it's going to be really difficult to me to answer any questions about this setup. And also as well, I really don't know anything about MIDI. So when I started looking at this last week, can you believe that this is the first time I've ever used MIDI for anything to do with beat making? So I'm a complete newbie in terms of MIDI, and it's going to be basically impossible to help you guys because I don't know what setups you've got. So all I can say is if you follow this video and it's still not working, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and change some of the settings and have a play around. Even though it's quite a complicated thing to set up, in theory, it's relatively simple. It's just sending MIDI data from one device to another. So you can probably do this with other devices as well. The reason I've actually chosen the SX is because I actually only have the old school MIDI cables. I don't have any of the new ones yet, so this could probably work with the Mark II as well. Also, the older devices like the 202 and the 303, they've got MIDI in as well. Again, they're the kind of old school cables. They've got the inputs on the back of those. This will probably also work for those as well. I don't know at this point. I haven't tried them, and I know people will probably want to know, does this work with other DAWs like FL Studio and Logic? The answer is, guys, I'm really sorry, but I don't know, and I don't own those DAWs either, so I won't be able to test it for you. You will just have to get your hands dirty and try and figure it out for yourselves. What I will say is that I have no MIDI knowledge whatsoever, and I've never done this process before until last week, and I managed to figure it out myself. So it is doable, and hopefully this guide will help you the majority of the way, if not the full way, to getting it working on your device as well. So yeah, sit down, grab a cup of coffee. This is probably going to be quite a long and detailed video, so get comfortable and we'll go through this a step at a time. So let's get into this one, and we'll start by what equipment you actually need. So obviously, first of all, you need the SX. The great thing about the SX is it's got MIDI in, so it hasn't got MIDI out, so you can't use this device to sequence other devices, but you can use other devices to sequence this one, if that makes sense. So it's got a MIDI import on the back. You're going to need some sort of way of connecting MIDI from your computer to this device. Now, I've got an audio interface which has a MIDI output on it. Super handy. When I bought my interface, I didn't really care for the fact that it had MIDI on the back, but I'm actually really grateful now. And obviously, to link those two things together as well, I've got your standard kind of MIDI cable. Now, I think this can probably be done other ways. Like I said, I'm no expert on MIDI, but I think you could probably get kind of USB to MIDI cables, which will do the job as well. But for me, at the moment, I'm using an old school MIDI cable. I'm going straight out the back of my interface and straight into the SX, and that's the way I got this working. So in terms of physical hardware, that is pretty much all you need. You just need Ableton or whatever your device is that can program MIDI, and a way of connecting it to the SX and obviously the device itself. Pretty simple stuff. The more technical stuff is coming with the setup side of it. Okay guys, now you're confident that you've got everything set up. You've got your MIDI coming from wherever it's coming from on your computer, whether that's USB or from your interface. It's going into the MIDI in on the SX. There's a couple of things that we need to do on the SX in order to get this to work. Now, firstly, it goes without saying that you have to have samples on the pads. I've got some samples in here, so I know it's all good to go. If you haven't got any samples, there's nothing to trigger, so it won't work. So I've got my samples in here, and there are two MIDI settings which you need to do in order to get this to work. Now, one of them, which is the first one, this is going to be channel 1 by default, but it's best to just check this anyway. So you go to function and 9, which is MIDI ch or MIDI channel. You can see here it says it's C1. You can go all the way from C1 to C15. So we'll get onto this again later, but basically this just needs to match the channel that you're sending from Ableton. So in Ableton, there's an option to choose the channel. It has to match what's on your SP. So I've got mine set to 1, and I'll have it set to 1 in Ableton, which I'll show you later. So you do that, make sure it's on 1. It should be by default anyway, so that's all good. And you press record. If you need to do this on older devices, I think there's a way you do this when you're booting up the machine. Next up is the one next to it, it's MIDI sync. So you go to function and 10, and this is really, really important. This is basically the main setting that got me realizing that this was possible. So go into this and you can see here there's three options. There's AUT, there's TMP, which I assume automatic tempo maybe. I don't know off the top of my head what those stand for. If you've got your device set on either of these, what your MIDI information is going to do, which is coming from Ableton, is that's actually going to trigger the patterns that you have built inside of your SX. It's not going to trigger the individual samples. So in order to get it to trigger the individual samples which are on your banks and on your pads, turn this all the way to the right and make sure that is on off. That is really, really essential. And when I figured out that setting, I was flying after that one. So make sure you do this one. Hit record again on that, and that's saved. And now the setup on the SX is completely done. So just make sure you've got samples on the pads. Easiest place to start is to stick some stuff on A. Make sure your MIDI channel matches where you're sending to on Ableton. I'm just going to do it as 1 for ease. And yeah, make sure your MIDI sync is set to off as well. Right, now that that stuff's done, we can get into Ableton and look in the settings there. Okay guys, so here we are inside Ableton, and there is now a few things that we need to set up in here as well. So you can see here I've got a MIDI track set up, and I've actually got a clip in here as well. There'll be more on that later. But the first thing that you want to do is go into your settings, that is in live, and then settings or file settings, or you can do the shortcut which is command and comma. So that's brought that up for me here now. You can see here I'm already inside the link and MIDI tab, and slightly down here you can see there's a load of information about MIDI ports here. So the good news is that it's showing my audio interface. This is my audio interface. It's called the UMC204HD. That's what I was showing you earlier in the video, that the MIDI is coming out of the back of. That's how I'm getting the MIDI from my computer. So just think of this as my audio interface, which I showed you earlier. So you can see here we've got the output and it's saying it is the audio interface. So that's really good. Now, as I mentioned, I don't know anything about MIDI really. So these are the settings that I have. Track on, sync on, remote off, and then I've got these set to 0 milliseconds and song. There might be someone in the comments that knows more about this than me, but these are the settings that worked for me. And of course, input doesn't matter because we're not using that, but output, that's what I've got set up in my preferences. You should see whatever device you are using to send MIDI from your computer and from Ableton. You should be able to see that here so that you can select it. So that's all you need to check in there. You can go out of this now. And you can see here, I've got a MIDI track set up. If you don't know how to do that, you can just right click and do insert MIDI track. And at the bottom of this MIDI track, you can see here now that it says MIDI 2. So it's basically saying here, the MIDI from this particular track, I'm going to send it to this. And you can see here again, we're on the right track because it says MIDI 2 and it's got my audio interface in there again, the UMC204HD. And as I was mentioning earlier before as well, this is where you select the channel. Now, I had mine set to 1 on my SX, so I'm going to go ahead and set it to 1 here as well. And there's something really important to note here. Basically, keep your SX set to channel 1 permanently. You don't need to change that at all once that's set up. But in here, now, if you are using banks A, B, C, D, or E, then you want to use channel 1. If you're using F, G, H, I, J, then you want to set this to channel 2. So channel 1 handles A to E and channel 2 handles F to J. So depending where the samples are on your SP and on your banks, if they're on bank A, B, C, D, or E, then you want to choose channel 1 here. If they're on F, G, H, I, J, then you want to choose channel 2. This is a bit weird that you don't have to match that on the SX. I just have mine permanently on channel 1 and it works perfectly switching between these two here on Ableton. So go ahead and select whichever one you need. So I'm using bank A, so I need to be in channel 1. And the next thing you're going to do is basically just double click here and set up a clip. Now you can see here that you basically get this huge piano roll and you need to basically find where your samples are on here. Now, the first way I did this was I made sure that the monitoring was on and I just held the mouse button and just scrolled through like this until I started hearing sounds from the SX. And by the way as well, what I will note here is that you should have your headphones plugged into your SX, not Ableton. You won't be able to hear anything in Ableton. You'll plug your headphones into the SX and that's where you'll hear if these are triggering. So basically from my experiments, what I found is if you're using bank A on the SX, then that basically equals B1 here in Ableton. So you can see here there's loads and loads of different piano notes that you can select. These are going to be different banks. If your samples are in different banks, say if they're in B or C, they're most likely going to be higher up here. So I don't think they should be any lower than this on the scale, because obviously A is B1. But yeah, you will have to dig through a little bit and find where each of them are. After a while, you'll probably start to realize that, you know, they're always on the same ones. For example, B1 is always A1, etc., etc. So what I've done here is gone ahead and just marked all my sounds. Now, obviously, I'm recording this video in Ableton, so you won't be able to hear any audio at this point, but you just have to trust me when I say that these are all the sounds that I have in bank A. Basically, B1, C2, C sharp 2, D sharp 2, and E2, they're all my chops. So basically here, that's pad A4, that hasn't got anything on it. So this is pad A1, pad A2, pad A3 on the SX, and then pad A5 and pad A6. Skipped a few, and these three here are my drums. So G2, G sharp 2, and A2, they're my hi-hat, snare, and kick. Pad 9 on the SX in bank A, so that'll be my kick. Pad 10 in the SX, that'll be my snare, and pad 11 on the SX, that'll be my hi-hats. So what I go ahead and do here now is duplicate this track. You can do Command D, or you can just duplicate it here. And I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these. These are the chops. And then I'm going to go back to the other track and delete all the drums off this one. So what I've got now is my chops in one track, and in the other track I've got my drums, and I'm going to go ahead and press fold. Now this is going to make things a lot easier because it'll only show you the MIDI notes that you've actually selected now. So that's why I went ahead and filled in these little ones so that you can press fold and it makes things a lot easier. So if I go to the other track now as well, you can see I've only got my chops in there, and all the rest of that piano roll, which is really messy and I'm not using, that's not in there anymore. So I might go ahead and rename these. Let's do chops and rename this to drums. Maybe we'll change the color of this as well. Let's do red. And now we've got two channels where we can control the drums and the chops. So I can go ahead in the drum channel, for example, and start drawing out a drum pattern. And the great thing about this as well is because the SX has actually got pad sensitivity sort of hidden inside it, you can't actually do it via the pads on the SX, but you can send velocity sensitive data to it and it will respond to it. So if you want to make a nice shuffly hi-hat sound, you can bring these down like this, have all the offbeats quieter than the accent, so you've got like an accent and a softer hi-hat here. So this is the hi-hats. That's actually going to do that on the SX, so it will respond to the velocity sensitivity that you send to it, which is really, really nice. So there we go. I've just got like a very basic drum loop set up there, and it's the same situation in the chops. Now, obviously, I've got all these marked and don't want to lose them, so what you can do is just move the header here. Now it will start from here. It won't actually play those notes, and you can go ahead and start putting in whatever the notes are that you want. Now, obviously, while you're doing this and you've got your headphones plugged into your SX, you will actually be able to hear which notes these are, and you'll be able to start mapping them out and doing whatever pattern it is that you want to do. And that is essentially it, really. I mean, you've got your drums there, you've got a drum channel, you've got your chops, you're going to have a pattern in here, you know, something random like this. Let's just say it's that. And when you hit play in Ableton, like I say, I can't show you the audio quite yet, but I will in a second. You can see that Ableton is playing that MIDI, and that MIDI is going to be sent directly to your SX. So we've got the drum sounds, we've found them in the piano roll, we've created this loop, and we've done the same for the chops. And now that information is going to get sent to the SX, and you're going to be able to hear the audio and the pads playing through your headphones, which are plugged into the SX. Okay guys, apologies for the audio in this part of the video, but this seems to be the best way to show you this bit. So we've got everything set up like I showed you before. We've got our tracks up here, the drums and the chops. I've put in the chop pattern, and if we click into the drums as well, you can see here I've got this drum pattern laid out as well. It's only really basic stuff just to show you this example. There are absolutely no sounds in Ableton here. These are just MIDI tracks. It is literally just MIDI information that I'm sending to the SX, and as I mentioned, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but I have actually done some of the velocities in here as well, just to add a little bit of a more dynamic feel. So basically what I've got here now is the SX, and you can see that the MIDI is plugged into the back of it. To record what's coming out of here, I'm actually using my Mark II over there, and that's got 303 compression on it. And I'm going to use Vinyl Sim, just add a little bit of flavor as well. So just to show you that this is actually working, I'm going to go ahead and press record 13 chord. I'm just going to show you this working now. This is just going to be just the hi-hats that are going to the SX. So you should be able to hear that now. And if I go down to the SX, you can see that it's being triggered by the MIDI that is on the screen. Okay, that's all good. And now if I go back to the full drum loop that I've done here, okay, so that's working as well, that's nice. And then we've got the chops, and let's just play those on their own first. Okay, so that's working as well, and let's just play all that together. And in the clip mode here, I could also go ahead and build a little variation. Let's just say I wanted to have a pause before the first snare hit. So if we're playing along like this. So in terms of the arrangement side of Ableton, you can obviously be as creative as you want with all the different clips that you use. It's just going to send that information to the SX and play it for you. So it's just a really nice system. And for me, you know, I've been saying recently that Ableton's become more involved in my workflow. This is just absolutely awesome that I can use Ableton to control this, but get the sound and the flavor from the SX, but have the brains of Ableton doing all the sequencing and programming for me. So really, really good stuff. Okay guys, that is it for this video. That is how I managed to make Ableton control the samples on the SX via MIDI. Like I mentioned, it is pretty straightforward stuff. It's just a bit of setup that you need to do, and then you've got the power of Ableton and the sound of the SX. It's a really, really nice combo. Hopefully in the future, I'll get around to doing more devices like the 202 and the 303. I think we could have a lot of fun with those. This video really did take a ton of effort to put together, guys, so I'd really appreciate it if, at the very least, you could give me a thumbs up and maybe leave a comment to say thanks. If you want to go that step further and keep me doing what I'm doing here, check out all the links in the description below. There's ways that you can donate, buy things from my shop, etc, etc. I'd really appreciate it if you could check those things out, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with more beat making content very soon. See you in the next one.